And for more on these sanctions, joining us now, founder of EuroPacific Capital, Peter Schiff. Peter, thanks for being with us today. So let's start with the Trump administration. Last week they designated the IRGC a terrorist organization. Now today they're announcing an end to oil sanctions waivers, obviously looking to choke Iran's economy, looking to drive their oil exports down to zero. What will this do to crude prices globally?
Well, crude prices are heading higher. Look at prices today. We're almost at $66 a barrel. Donald Trump should probably get his priorities straight, because on the one hand, he's upset that the Federal Reserve was raising interest rates and he wants them to lower interest rates. But, the main excuse that the Fed offered for not raising rates was low oil prices. Well, oil prices have risen by more than 40% since the last time the Fed hiked rates. And if prices keep rising, they may run out of excuses.
Now, I don't know if you'd agree, but the big winner here, I think, would be Saudi Arabia, who has obviously been at a proxy war with Iran for years now. What happens to their oil exports?
Well, certainly, if Iran can't export its oil, global demand, being what it is, other oil producers, including Saudi Arabia, are going to benefit by selling crude oil at higher prices. But, of course, the U.S. economy is going to suffer because Americans are going to be paying higher prices for their oil. It's also going to affect the reported rates of inflation, because you've got prices in the headline CPI. And you look at the retail sales numbers we just got, the strongest part of it was gasoline, because consumers are paying higher prices for gas. Gas prices are going to continue to rise. In fact, if we rise by $1 more, oil prices will be higher than all but one of the last Fed rate hikes. And in fact, we don't have much farther to go from here for the price of oil to be higher than it was every single time the Fed had raised rates in the past. So this is going to add additional downward pressure to the U.S. economy, while putting upward pressure on the measured rates of inflation, and maybe putting more pressure on the Fed to raise interest rates, which is the last thing Trump wants the Fed to do.
And does this impact Saudi Arabia's position then within OPEC and their negotiating position with non-OPEC but cooperating members like Russia?
Well, perhaps, but I think more importantly, I think it angers the world. I think a lot of other countries do not like the fact that the United States tells them what to do, tries to tell them who they can do business with and who they can't, and threatens to punish them if they don't do what it wants. And the only reason that the U.S. yields this power is because the dollar is the reserve currency, and we threaten to cut off access to U.S. dollars in the banking system if other countries don't do what we say. But these other countries have, less motivation to continue this standard, particularly when it comes to oil, because one of the things that gives the U.S. dollar value is the fact that all of these oil exporting nations price oil in dollars. And to the extent that we piss them off and they start pricing oil in another currency or pricing it in gold or something like that, that further weakens the demand for the dollar. And this is coming at a time when we are more dependent than ever on the rest of the world. We are running larger budget deficits than ever in our history. We're running larger trade deficits than ever in our history, and we're not even in recession yet, at least technically. So during this next recession, we are going to be off the charts in the amount of money we're borrowing from the rest of the world, and therefore more dependent than ever on their charity. And this is not a time to be, poking that hornet's nest by reminding them of how much power they're giving us by agreeing to accept the dollar as a reserve currency and agreeing to price oil in dollars.
And now, Peter, you touched on this just a moment ago of how this will affect the average Joe, at the pump. So can you expand on that a little bit, especially given that President Trump is touting how well the economy is doing? If people take a hit at the pump, could he argue that this is the price hike that we see every summer?
Well, he's always going to try to make excuses why anything bad that's happening isn't his fault or is transitory. And look, oil prices are going up anyway, but anything that we do to restrict supply is going to increase price. But I think what's really going to push oil prices higher is when the dollar finally starts heading lower, because so far it's kind of defied gravity, because the only thing that was propping up the U.S. dollar over the last several years was the false belief that the Fed was going to be able to normalize interest rates and shrink their balance sheet. Well, the Fed has now admitted that they're not going to do either. And so all of the props that were underlying the dollar have been knocked out, yet the dollar has, is still up there. It hasn't collapsed yet, but I think it will when the markets recognize the significance of what happened, and that's just going to add more upward pressure to an oil market that's already going up.
All right, Peter Schiff, we'll have to leave it right there. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us on this.
Sure, my pleasure.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.